Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
You know, you can be sitting in a perfectly climate-controlled room.
Yeah.
Like resting on a soft, ergonomic chair in absolute zero physical danger.
Yeah.
And your brain can still trigger this massive biological panic attack just because, I don't know, you thought about a weird conversation you had in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Or because you started imagining a meeting that hasn't even happened yet.
Right. It is objectively wild when you stop and actually think about it.
It really is. Why is our mental hardware built to actively torture us when everything in our immediate physical reality is perfectly fine?
Well, it's basically the ultimate evolutionary glitch. I mean, we possess this phenomenal world-building neocortex, right?
Yeah.
But we're running it on an ancient nervous system.
A nervous system that still thinks. Like every negative emotion is a literal tiger hiding in the brush.
Exactly. The body simply doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and a psychological one. You imagine a bad outcome, and your adrenal glands just flood your system with cortisol, completely the same as if you were being chased.
And that biological reality is exactly what we're getting into today. So welcome to the deep dive. We know you are here because you want those profound, world-shifting aha moments.
Yeah, the real insights.
Right. But you absolutely do not want the overwhelming academic jargon or that toxic positivity that usually comes with discussions about happiness.
Oh, definitely not.
So our mission today is ambitious, but it's clear. We are exploring the fundamental architecture of human unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at why we suffer, how we construct that suffering neuron by neuron, and the radical psychological shifts required to actually escape it.
It is a phenomenal mission, especially given the source material we have in front of us today.
Yes, I'm so excited about this one.
We are working with some exclusive early access excerpts from a highly anticipated upcoming book by Joe Bandra. Specifically, we're dissecting 2 really pivotal chapters. One is titled Suffering and Separation, and the other is called Forgiveness.
And what I love is that this text bypasses all those usual self-help platitudes. It goes straight into the foundational mechanics of the human mind.
It really does. It doesn't pull any punches.
To set the stage, Bandra establishes a premise that is almost humorously universal, which is just everyone suffers.
Yeah.
The text lays it out so starkly. Rich people suffer in mansions, poor people suffer. Religious people, atheists, scientists, mystics.
And I love this observation from the book. Even the people who post those serene sunset inspirational quotes on social media suffer.
Oh, often they're the ones suffering the most.
Oh, right. But That observation highlights a vital truth, like having an intellectual grasp of happiness or projecting a curated image of peace. It does not grant you immunity from the human condition.
No, not at all.
The overarching question the text poses isn't whether we suffer. If you have a pulse, you experience suffering. The much more vital question is why.
And historically, we've built this endless roster of scapegoats for that why.
Right.
We've blamed fate, angry gods, original sin, societal structures, biology, our upbringing, karma. And modern psychology points really heavily toward our childhood conditioning, while neuroscience points toward our evolutionary wiring.
And the author acknowledges that each of those perspectives contains a piece of the puzzle. But beneath all of those layers, this book points to a much more intimate, mechanical collision happening inside us every single day.
Okay, let's unpack this collision.
Yeah.
Because this is where the book really shifts how you look at a bad day. The text moves from the universality of suffering right into the mechanical cause of it.
Right, the actual friction.
Yeah. The core premise is this suffering does not arise from reality alone, and it doesn't arise from thought alone. It emerges from the collision between the two.
It's the mind fighting what is actually happening.
Exactly. It's the friction of the mind fighting what is actually happening in the present moment.
Let's ground this in the ordinary, everyday examples provided in the text, because the mundanity is what makes it so profound, I think. Reality says, it is raining. That is a completely neutral fact. Condensation has reached a point where water droplets are falling from the sky. But your mind says, it should be sunny because I planned a picnic.
Yes. This shows.
Oh, that discrepancy right there. That gap between what is and what your mind demands it to be, that is the literal birthplace of psychological conflict.
I was reading this, and it instantly made me think of fighting a weather app.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You know, you look at your phone,
Yeah.
you see there is a 100% chance of a thunderstorm, and you just start internally screaming at the screen. You are demanding that the digital pixels change.
Yeah, demanding the barometric pressure of the earth shifts solely because you had outdoor plans.
Exactly. But screaming at the phone won't stop the rain. It just guarantees that your morning is ruined before you even step outside.
And the rain is merely an inconvenience, right? It's just a biological organism adapting to moisture. The screaming at the phone, the tightening of the chest, the narrative of, my weekend is ruined, that is the suffering. And it is entirely self-generated.
It's all in our heads.
The book points out another example that hits a little closer to home for all of us. Reality says, you are getting older, your cells are aging.
Oof, yeah.
And the mind screams, I should remain young. Or reality dictates, this relationship or this chapter of life is ending. And the mind insists it should continue forever.
You know, it's funny. We act like this is some modern epidemic caused by smartphones and modern stress, but this exact mental loop is diagnosed like 2,000 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
The text brings in Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher. And Epictetus wasn't dealing with traffic jams or Wi-Fi outages. He was dealing with Roman exile, slavery, and severe physical hardship.
Real existential threats.
Right. Yet his conclusion was identical. He observed that people are disturbed not by events themselves, but by their judgments about those events.
The human hardware just hasn't fundamentally changed since ancient Greece. I mean, modern cognitive behavioral therapy continuously rediscovers this exact same Stoic insight.
We just use fancier words now.
Yeah, exactly. We dress it up in clinical terminology. We call it cognitive distortions or maladaptive schemas. But it is the same observation Epictetus made. You are arguing with reality, and you are losing.
You always lose when you argue with reality.
You do, but you lose at the cost of your own peace.
Okay, hold on. This is where my brain always hits a wall with this philosophy.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the secret is just accepting everything exactly as it is, aren't we just lowering our expectations for life? Like, if my roof is leaking or I'm in a really toxic workplace and I just accept it, aren't I just giving up?
Right.
It sounds like enlightenment is just a fancy spiritualized word for apathy. Is the secret to happiness just giving up on wanting things to be better?
That is the most important resistance to this concept, and it's exactly how the human ego defends its right to stay angry. We conflate acceptance with passivity.
Yes, that's exactly how it feels.
We genuinely believe, if I don't generate massive internal rage about this injustice or this leaky roof, I won't have the fuel or the motivation to fix it. But let's look at the underlying mechanics of that resistance. Why does the ego feel this compulsive need to argue with reality in the first place?
It has to be getting some sort of reward, right?
Mm.
Like we wouldn't burn that many calories being angry if there wasn't a payoff.
The payoff is the illusion of control. The ego believes that by resisting the present moment, by generating all this friction, it is somehow managing the situation.
Wow. Okay.
It's a massive evolutionary misfire. In a primal survival situation, if reality presents a predator, your resistance, that massive spike in adrenaline and the fight or flight response literally saves your life. You fight reality to survive.
But there are no predators anymore.
Right. The tragedy of modern human psychology is that we apply that exact same life or death biological resistance to traffic jams, to aging, to like an offhand comment a coworker made on a Tuesday.
Pretending a rainy day is a threat to our existence.
We are. So to answer your pushback acceptance doesn't mean you sit on the couch while your house floods from the leaky roof. It means you grab a bucket and call a roofer without spending 3 hours agonizing over how unfair it is that roofs leak.
Or wondering if the universe is punishing you.
Exactly. Or fuming over how much the repair will cost. You save an immense amount of psychological and biological energy.
So you're just fixing the roof rather than fixing the roof while simultaneously acting as the victim of a global conspiracy of defective shingles.
You deal with the reality. You just drop the exhausting narrative about the reality.
That makes a lot of sense. But realizing that we constantly fight reality doesn't fully explain how we manage to do it so effectively. Like, what is the actual mechanism that allows us to generate so much suffering out of thin air?
It's our mental time travel.
Yeah, the text goes incredibly deep into our unique evolutionary ability to mentally leave the present moment. We are essentially mental time travelers.
We are the only species on Earth capable of it to this degree, and it is a profound double-edged sword. The author draws a brilliant contrast between human cognition and animal cognition to highlight just how bizarre our daily mental state actually is.
The deer and the cat. I loved this part. The text points out that a deer does not spend 3 hours foraging while simultaneously worrying about its winter food retirement plan.
Right.
And a cat does not lie awake at 3 a.m. replaying a slightly embarrassing meow it made in front of another cat 5 years ago.
Because animals are biologically tethered to the now. If there is a predator, their sympathetic nervous system activates, they react, they escape. The moment the threat is gone, their parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and they rest.
They literally shake off the adrenaline, go back to grazing.
Yes. Human beings, though, possess this unparalleled dedication to abandoning the present moment. Memory allows us to drag the pain of the past into the present. Imagination allows us to drag the anxiety of the future into the present.
And obviously, the book acknowledges that this mental time travel is a gift. Like, without memory and imagination, there is no human civilization.
It is the absolute foundation of our survival as a species. The ability to project into the future allows for agriculture, knowing you have to plant seeds now to eat in 6 months. It allows for engineering, for medicine, for art.
We wouldn't have bridges without the ability to run a mental simulation of gravity and structural integrity before building.
Exactly. But then there's the biological burden of that exact same software. Let's dig into the neuroscience of this, because the text outlines an incredible physiological phenomenon.
Let's do it.
You can be sitting safely in your house, but the moment you start vividly imagining a future financial disaster, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, sounds the alarm. It does not wait to verify if the threat is physical or purely imaginary.
It's just reacting to the image in your head.
Right. The amygdala is incredibly fast, but it's not very smart. It communicates directly with the hypothalamus, which activates the pituitary gland, which signals the adrenal glands. Suddenly, you have a massive cortisol and adrenaline dump into your bloodstream.
So your heart rate elevates, your breathing becomes shallow.
Your digestion halts because the body is diverting blood to your limbs to run away.
So you are literally fighting for your life against a ghost.
And you are doing it for hours a day. This is the physiological basis of chronic stress. A deer experiences extreme stress for 5 minutes a week. Humans can maintain a low-grade fight-or-flight response for 30 years straight just by ruminating on their mortgage.
Ruminating, that's the word the author uses for this endless mental looping. And I have to bring in my favorite analogy from the text because it is so incredibly visual.
The dog.
Yes, it describes the ruminating mind as being like a dog determined to inspect the same patch of grass over and over, convinced that just one more sniff is finally going to reveal the meaning of life.
We all have our own personal patches of grass.
We really do.
It's the what-if scenario that we play out 50 different ways. It's the "I should have said this instead" shower argument. We chew on the same thought repeatedly because the ego has convinced us that worrying is a form of productive preparation.
We think if we suffer enough in advance, we can somehow prevent the bad thing from happening.
Exactly. Or we use this massive evolutionary computing power to suffer over completely mundane things. The text lists the profound existential things we suffer over: life, death, disease, meaning.
And then notes that we occasionally suffer immense psychological distress simply because we drank a cup of coffee at 9 p.m. and decided we've ruined our lives.
Yes, it perfectly captures the absurdity of the human mind.
Mm.
You are lying awake at 2 a.m., your heart is racing from the caffeine, but the biological stimulation isn't what's torturing you. The torture is the narrative.
Why did I do this? I am always making bad choices. I have no self-control.
Tomorrow's big meeting is going to be a disaster. I'm going to get fired because I drank an espresso. The mind cascades from a beverage choice to total existential ruin in 5 seconds.
It's so relatable, it hurts. So how do we actually navigate this? How do we separate the gift part of this ability, planning, creativity, building civilizations, from the burden, which is just an endless dress rehearsal for disasters that never arrive?
The separation comes entirely from conscious awareness. It comes from recognizing when you are using thought as a tool and when thought is using you as a hostage.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
When you are sitting down with a spreadsheet, planning your finances for the month, you are intentionally using the tool of imagination. The moment you close the laptop, walk into the kitchen, and start agonizing over ending up destitute while you hold a perfectly steady job, the tool has hijacked the user.
So it's about noticing when that shift happens.
Exactly. The practice is noticing the physiological shift. Noticing when your body is reacting to a threat that only exists in the theater of your mind and gently bringing your attention back to the physical reality of the room you are in.
But realizing that we obsessively time travel into the future doesn't fully explain why we do it so relentlessly. What exactly is the brain looking for when it scans the horizon of the future?
It's looking for something it thinks it's missing.
Right. It's looking to cure a symptom it usually won't even admit it has. Which brings us to the silent underlying assumption driving all of this rumination, the illusion of lack.
This is where the book moves from the mechanics of psychology into, profound existential insight. It addresses that persistent, subtle feeling of something is missing.
It's a feeling that isn't always conscious. The author describes it as a silent hum in the background of our operating system. It dictates the entire structure of our thoughts, even if the specific words we use change from day to day.
Because the grammar of lack is universal. It always relies on a conditional future tense. I will be happy when. I will finally feel complete when. I will be able to relax after.
It will become enough if.
Yes. The variables constantly change depending on your age and your culture. Maybe the variable is a promotion, finding a spouse, losing 20 pounds, or buying a house in a better zip code. But the underlying sentence structure remains identical.
Fulfillment is perpetually projected into the future. It is never allowed to exist right now.
And the text points out that this isn't just an individual quirk, it's a structural pillar of our entire society. Entire multi-billion-dollar industries are built on this exact psychological vulnerability.
Advertising depends on it. Politics depends on it.
Modern consumer culture is essentially a highly efficient delivery system for one simple message. You are incomplete.
Wow. Yeah, that's entirely true.
The economy of lack functions by validating your deepest fear. The messaging reinforces that you are a fragment. But conveniently, if you buy this specific luxury vehicle, achieve this specific corporate status, or apply the specific anti-aging cream, fulfillment will finally arrive.
You will be made whole.
You will be made whole. And the reason we keep falling for it is that sometimes it actually works. Briefly.
Right. You get the promotion. You buy the dream house. And for a week, maybe a month, you feel absolutely incredible. The hum of lack goes quiet.
But then we run face first into hedonic adaptation. Let's explain the mechanism behind this, because evolutionary biology wired us this way on purpose.
Please do, because it is so frustrating.
Hedonic adaptation is the process where the human mind rapidly adapts to a new positive reality and drops your dopamine levels back to your baseline. Why did evolution do this? Because a prehistoric hominid who finds a bush full of berries, gets completely satisfied, and decides to just sit there forever.
Gets eaten or starves when winter comes.
Exactly. Evolution doesn't care about your lasting happiness. It cares about keeping you moving, foraging, and surviving. It is literally wired to reset your satisfaction to zero so you keep hunting.
So our biology is actively fighting our ability to be content.
Entirely. The text describes it perfectly. The dream job that you prayed for just becomes a set of annoying daily tasks. The new car that gave you a thrill just becomes the box you sit in while stuck in traffic.
The promotion becomes your new baseline expectation, and you immediately start looking at the next rung on the ladder.
What's fascinating here is how quickly human beings adapt to miracles and turn them into mundane baseline expectations. The extraordinary becomes normal. And the exact moment it becomes normal, the feeling of lack rushes back in. The mind creates a new condition, a new requirement for happiness.
The finish line quietly moves while you aren't looking.
It always moves, and the desperate search resumes.
Let me push back on this because I think a lot of people hear this and worry about the implications. If ambition and progress are often fueled by this illusion of lack, what fuels a person who doesn't feel lack?
That's a fair question.
If I realize the finish line is a mirage, do I just sit on the couch forever? Because without desire, without that hunger, nothing gets built, nothing gets improved, no art gets made.
That is a crucial distinction, and the author addresses it carefully. The problem the text is highlighting is not desire itself. As you said, without desire, there is no movement. The issue is identity.
Identity attached to the desire.
Exactly. The suffering arises when your core identity becomes inextricably linked to fulfillment through acquisition. It's the deep-seated, painful belief that an essential piece of you is absent and must be found in an object, a relationship, or a status symbol.
Right.
When mystics and philosophers across various cultures noticed this phenomenon, they didn't frame it as a moral failing. They didn't say greed is a sin. They framed it as a profound perceptual error.
A fundamental misunderstanding about who and what we actually are.
If you fundamentally believe yourself to be a separate, isolated fragment struggling for completion in a hostile universe, then lack isn't just a fleeting feeling. It is an inevitable reality.
Because you're disconnected from everything else.
Right. If you are a fragment, there will always be something missing, something threatening, something uncertain. The separate self is condemned to live in a perpetual state of incompletion. It can never be satisfied because its very existence is defined by separation.
Okay, before we go further, I want to highlight something from Joe Bandra directly here, because this is where the text really starts pointing toward the exit door of this whole maze.
Yeah.
In this upcoming book, Bandra notes that the root of all this suffering is what he calls psychological separation.
Yes.
It's the belief that we stand apart from reality, apart from life, and apart from each other.
That is the core insight that everything else in the book hinges on.
But the profound paradox he points out is that when the belief in this separation weakens, our resistance decreases, but it does not produce passivity.
No, not at all.
A person still acts, creates, loves, and pursues goals. The difference is that the action emerges from a place of wholeness rather than deficiency.
Think about the implications of that shift. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this explains the fundamental difference between merely surviving and truly thriving.
Let's unpack what psychological separation actually means in practice then.
It's the persistent belief that you are an isolated unit, completely cut off from the source of your being, locked inside your skull, competing for resources and love with 8 billion other isolated units.
Sounds exhausting.
It is a state of profound, terrifying alienation.
It's feeling like you're completely alone in a room, even when you're standing in a crowded stadium.
Yes. When you operate from that paradigm of separation, every single action you take is either defensive or acquisitive. You are constantly trying to fortify your separate self against attack, or you are frantically grabbing at things, money, validation, power, to fill the internal void.
But Bandra is saying that when you begin to see through this illusion, when you realize you are deeply connected to and an intrinsic part of reality, the desperate, exhausting struggle just relaxes.
The frantic demand that reality conform to your expectations loses its grip.
Because you weren't fighting reality anymore. You realize you were participating in it. You still chop wood and carry water. You still go to work. You still raise your kids and try to improve your community, but you aren't doing it to prove you have a right to exist.
Right.
You're doing it as a natural expression of the wholeness that is already there. You create out of joy, not out of a desperate need for validation.
Action out of wholeness is inherently creative and sustainable. Action out of deficiency is exhausting and eventually leads to burnout.
Okay, this distinction between the unavoidable pain of life and the suffering we create around it is so important to clarify here, because the text is very careful. It makes it crystal clear. Illness, loss, grief, physical pain, these are intensely real. Denying them would be deeply dishonest and psychologically damaging.
It would be toxic positivity, which is really just another form of resisting reality. The book is not suggesting that life doesn't hurt.
But the profound distinction it draws is this. Pain belongs to the raw experience. My leg is broken, and this hurts. Suffering belongs entirely to the interpretation and the resistance.
My leg is broken, this should not be happening, my entire year is ruined, the universe hates me, I'll never be the same.
Exactly. That is the dividing line. You cannot always avoid pain. A broken bone hurts. Losing a loved one brings immense grief. But suffering, the heavy, suffocating narrative that life is uniquely punishing you, that this pain defines your entire existence, that is optional.
And it can be investigated.
The author references the Buddha's teachings here. The Buddha built much of his philosophy around this specific observation, not because life is inherently miserable, but because the suffering points directly back to the root cause, our resistance and our illusion of separation.
That's right.
Okay, so psychological separation is the root of the suffering, and it's exhausting us. How do we actually dismantle it? How do we drop the burden? This is where the book makes a massive pivot.
It really does.
It transitions into chapter 27, which is entirely about forgiveness. But listener, I need you to buckle up, because this is not the kind of forgiveness you were taught in Sunday school or by your elementary school guidance counselor.
Not even close. The author uses this chapter to completely dismantle and redefine what the word forgiveness actually means. And he starts by clearing up the incredibly common, deeply ingrained misconceptions.
Because most of us hear the word forgiveness, and our defenses immediately go up. We brace ourselves. We think, you want me to excuse what happened to me. You want me to say that the person who abused me or betrayed me was right. You want me to let them off the hook?
And the text is very direct here. No. Forgiveness is not approval. It is not justification. It is not pretending that harmful, toxic actions were acceptable. And it is certainly not becoming a passive doormat.
The author specifically and emphatically notes it is not spiritual amnesia.
Right. I love the practical analogy the text uses here to ground this concept. It says, suppose someone borrows your car and recklessly drives it into a lake. Forgiveness does not require you to hand them the keys to your new car the next morning.
Wisdom and forgiveness are not enemies.
Exactly. You can forgive someone internally while simultaneously establishing impenetrable, rock-solid external boundaries. You can completely forgive a business partner who stole from you and still take them to court and ensure they never have access to your bank accounts again.
You're not getting my keys ever again. You're paying for the damages. But I'm also not going to spend the next 10 years of my life thinking about you every time I take a shower.
That is the crucial difference. Traditional forgiveness usually operates within a very familiar legalistic framework. There is a clearly defined victim. There is a clearly defined offender. A wrong occurred.
And the victim, operating from a place of moral high ground, chooses to graciously bestow a pardon upon the offender.
The author acknowledges that this framework can be beautiful, it can be helpful, and it often leads to a degree of healing. But then the text introduces a philosophy from a text called A Course in Miracles, often referred to as ASIM.
Yes, this part is fascinating.
For context, ASIM is a psychological and spiritual self-study curriculum published in the 1970s that focuses entirely on dismantling the ego and healing the mind through a radical shift in perception. The author uses ASIM to suggest that the traditional legalistic framework of forgiveness is actually keeping us trapped.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because ASIM introduces a premise that is startling. The text even admits it sounds impossible, maybe even highly offensive at first glance.
It challenges everything.
ASIM states that true forgiveness is not primarily about what another person did. It is about correcting how we perceive what happened.
Yeah.
And I have to pause and push back hard here on behalf of everyone listening. Let's be real. If a business partner embezzles your life savings, or worse, if someone inflicts severe physical or emotional abuse on you, how is it my perception that needs correcting? Isn't the victim completely entitled to their grievance? The event actually happened. The trauma is real.
Saying your perception needs correcting feels like the ultimate form of victim blaming.
It really does.
It is the most natural, understandable reaction in the world to feel deeply offended by this concept. It challenges the very foundation of how human beings process injustice and seek safety. The ego immediately flares up, puts on its armor, and says, "Are you invalidating my pain?"
Right.
But it is crucial to understand that ASIM, as presented in Bandra's text, is not denying the physical events. It is not excusing the harmful behavior, and it is not telling victims that they didn't suffer. It is operating on a completely different psychological layer, the layer of how we construct our identity after the trauma.
Walk us through that layer. How does correcting perception not just invalidate a person's legitimate pain?
Let's go back to the foundational premise we discussed earlier, that the root of all suffering is separation. The belief that we are isolated, vulnerable fragments. From this starting point, everything the ego does, fear, guilt, judgment, conflict, defense, grows out of this mistaken identity of being separate and under constant threat.
Okay, I follow.
When a severe harm occurs, human beings aren't just reacting to the painful event itself. We take the event and we interpret it through this deep, structural misunderstanding of who we are.
We take the traumatic event and we use it as undeniable proof for the narrative that the world is inherently hostile, that we are permanently broken, and that we must remain constantly defended.
Yes. We forge an identity out of the wound. ACM describes the ego as a thought system entirely built upon separation. And the ego needs grievances the way a fire needs oxygen. Without grievances, the ego starves.
So it's actively looking for reasons to be upset.
Its favorite, most energizing activities are judging, comparing, blaming, defending, and resenting.
And the text gives that brilliant, slightly embarrassing example we can all relate to. The ego absolutely loves replaying an argument from 20 years ago while taking a shower. It literally never runs out of material.
Because every single grievance, no matter how small or how massive, serves a specific structural purpose for the ego. The astonishing claim AC makes is that every grievance strengthens your belief in separation. Every resentment reinforces the story that someone else has the power to take something vital away from your core self, thereby proving that you are lacking, vulnerable, and incomplete. Every judgment you hold strengthens the illusion of a divided adversarial world where you must remain on guard.
And we hold on to these grievances like they're prized, valuable possessions. The text points out how absurd this biological and psychological mechanism is. Someone insults you or disrespects you. The actual physical event lasts, what, 5 seconds?
Right. It's over instantly.
The event ends, the air goes quiet, but the mind decides to put that 5-second event on life support. Hours later, days later, years, sometimes decades later, we are still actively generating the stress response.
The person who insulted you has completely forgotten it happened. They are miles away, going about their life, completely unaffected. Meanwhile, you're carrying this heavy psychological furniture around your house, rearranging it every single day, bumping your shins on it, and wondering why you feel so exhausted.
Carrying the psychological furniture, I love that phrase, it's so visceral.
This raises an incredibly important question, which the text explicitly asks a reader to consider. Who is actually suffering now? Is it the person who made the careless comment or committed the wrong 20 years ago?
Definitely not.
Or is it the person replaying the tape today, triggering their own nervous system, flooding their own body with cortisol over and over again?
It brings to mind that old saying, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Exact.
Or, another way to look at it, it's like carrying a heavy backpack full of jagged rocks that you don't even realize you strapped on. You're exhausted, your back is aching, you're snapping at your friends, and you're blaming the steep terrain of life, when the reality is you just absolutely refuse to take the backpack off because you think the rocks are keeping you safe.
That is exactly why ACM frames forgiveness not as an act of moral superiority where you are pardoning a sinner, but purely as an act of personal freedom and biological relief.
It's for you, not them.
It is the recognition that our perception of the present moment is currently being distorted by the fear and the pain of the past.
And this brings up the concept of projection, which the text highlights as one of ACM's most vital and most difficult insights.
Projection is a massive pillar of this philosophy. The psychological idea is that much of what we vehemently condemn, judge, and attack in other people reflects something unresolved, feared, or suppressed within ourselves.
It's hard to admit that.
It is. It's not always a literal one-to-one direct correlation, like if you are angry at a thief, it doesn't mean you secretly want to rob a bank, but it operates profoundly beneath the surface. You might be projecting your own deep fears of scarcity or a lack of control onto them.
The book uses this incredible analogy of wearing eyeglasses with a smudge on the lens. If you have a smudge of dirt on your glasses, everywhere you look, you see the smudge. You look at a beautiful sky, it's smudged. You look at your best friend, they're smudged. You could spend your entire life running around frantically trying to Windex the world, trying to scrub the horizon clean, trying to fix everyone else's behavior. But the issue isn't out there. It is sitting right in front of your own eye.
And ACM, through Bandra's text, invites us to stop scrubbing the world and start examining the lens of our own mind. Again, it is crucial to reiterate that the text is not saying terrible things never happen or that abuse is an illusion.
We have to keep remembering that distinction.
Right. It's asking a much deeper, more liberating question. Can we see beyond the surface event to something larger? Can we see beyond a person's terrible, toxic behavior to the profound terror and fear that lives beneath it? Can we see beyond their attack to the deep psychological confusion that produced it?
Which leads to one of the most famous and probably the most challenging teachings in ACM that Bandra includes in the text. Every call for love is either an expression of love or a call for love.
It's a total ground-up paradigm shift in human relations, because recognizing the loving person is easy. The person baking you cookies or offering support is clearly expressing love, but the difficult person.
The text lists them explicitly. The angry person, the fearful person, the jealous, controlling, manipulative, or attacking person.
According to this framework, those toxic behaviors do not arise from some innate demonic evil. They arise from intense confusion, from unbearable fear, from a deep, agonizing forgetting of who they actually are. Their attack is a desperate, twisted, highly dysfunctional call for love.
And it doesn't excuse the behavior. They still don't get the keys to the car. They still face legal or social consequences. But it completely transforms how you interpret the behavior internally.
Yes.
You stop seeing an all-powerful monster who has destroyed your peace, and you start seeing a deeply wounded, confused human being who is profoundly lost in their own illusion of separation.
And by changing how you interpret their behavior, you completely change how their actions impact your nervous system in the present moment, because that is the real, tangible power of forgiveness. The text makes it clear, forgiveness does not possess a time machine. It does not change the past. The past remains exactly where it belongs, in the past.
But it changes the present. It stops the amygdala from firing. It stops the nervous system from endlessly reliving the trauma. It releases the massive amount of emotional and biological investment that is required to keep that 20-year-old shower argument alive.
It allows your perception to become fresh, clear, and unburdened again. True peace can finally return to the mind because the internal war, the constant defense against a past that is already gone, has been called off.
And then the text takes us to the final, deepest step, the most radical step of all.
Because what actually happens when you finally wipe the smudge off the lens and drop the heavy furniture you've been carrying for decades.
Right. The ultimate conclusion of Bandra's text isn't just that you feel a little lighter or that your blood pressure improves. It's a profound existential shift.
The text states that true forgiveness eventually recognizes that the separate self itself, the vulnerable me who feels perpetually injured, and the villainous other who caused the injury is part of the fundamental misunderstanding.
The entire agonizing drama of victim and offender, of winner and loser, of attacker and attacked, unfolds entirely within the arena of separation.
As your belief in separation weakens through this daily practice of letting go of grievances, your core identity itself changes. You stop identifying as a fragment.
The author shares a very vulnerable personal anecdote here to illustrate this. He talks about an awakening that occurred to him on April 15th, 2020. And he describes it in such a fascinating way. He says it wasn't really an experience in the traditional sense because the reference point was absent.
The separate egoic self that would normally claim the experience, categorize it, and brag about it just wasn't there.
And the aftermath of that shift is what is truly compelling for anyone seeking peace. The text notes that after this shift in perception, there was no effort required to forgive. Forgiveness wasn't a chore, because there was no separate self left to feel offended and no separate other left to blame. The entire mechanism of offense collapsed.
Just love remained. And the author is very specific here. He's not talking about personal love, not romantic love, or the emotional love you feel for a friend. He describes absolute love, without conditions, without opposites, without a reference point.
For a period of time, he experienced reality exactly as Asen described it. Not as a neat philosophical theory to read about, but as a direct, lived, undeniable reality.
It's a profound state to try and communicate using language because our language inherently relies on subject and object, a separate me talking to a separate you. But he is describing a state of being where that artificial boundary dissolves and what is left is just the unbroken whole.
And I deeply appreciate the invitation of the text at the end. The author explicitly says, I am not asking you to believe this. He points out that the Course itself wouldn't ask for blind faith or dogmatic adherence. The invitation is purely experimental.
Just investigate.
Observe your own mind. Practice noticing the heavy furniture you're carrying around today. Question your absolute certainty about your perceptions, and just see what happens to your stress levels.
It brilliantly brings forgiveness down from this lofty, unattainable religious pedestal and turns it into a highly practical, everyday tool for daily liberation. You aren't trying to become a saint. You're as observing when you are creating the painful friction of separation and choosing step by step to relax the grip.
It is wild to think that forgiveness isn't actually something you do. It isn't an action item on your self-improvement to-do list. The text suggests that perhaps forgiveness is just what naturally remains when the exhausting effort of judgment finally relaxes. It's the baseline state of peace that is revealed when the clouds of grievance part.
It's not a reluctant gift we give to another person to free them. It is the profound freedom we finally discover for ourselves.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by mapping out the mechanical collision between the mind and reality, discovering that our suffering isn't just the unavoidable facts of life, but our relentless, exhausting demand that reality be different than it is.
We explored the biological trap of mental time travel and how our remarkable evolutionary ability to plan and remember has morphed into a rogue machine for chronic rumination and nervous system distress.
We looked at the illusion of lack, that silent societal hum of something is missing that keeps the finish line of our fulfillment constantly moving just out of reach.
And finally, we dismantled the traditional view of forgiveness, moving it away from a framework of excusing toxic behavior and toward a radical correction of perception, dismantling the ego's addiction to grievances, and ultimately dissolving the illusion of separation itself.
So as you go back into your day, to the traffic, the endless emails, the complicated relationships, watch for the friction. Notice when you start arguing with a weather app of reality. Notice the heavy psychological furniture you're still carrying from 10 years ago. And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the final question of Bandra's text. What remains when separation collapses? Think about this.
It's a big one.
If your entire sense of self, your whole personality, has been built around the things you feel you lack, and the grievances you've carefully curated, polished, and carried for years, who would you actually be if you woke up tomorrow with total spiritual amnesia? If you couldn't remember who wronged you or what society told you were supposed to achieve in order to be happy, what kind of life would you build from that truly blank canvas?
It is a beautiful and terrifying question.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by Finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.